What is group polarization, and how is it reinforcing the spread of rampant misinformation in the United States? This class continues our course on combating misinformation and disinformation in yourself and in your friends and family and in your communities. As a reminder, the entirety of this course was recorded as a live seminar, and that recording is already available in the free section on our Patreon that is labeled Crisis Preparedness. That's where we're sharing all of our safe-ish protesting classes, our street medic classes, our herbalism for activism classes, and all of those are free and public. You can find them at patreon.com/Sanctum of the Craft. But if you want the prettier, shorter chunks that have been edited, you can find those on YouTube. So, to continue, one reason why filter bubbles and echo chambers are so effective at reinforcing misinformation and disinformation is group polarization. Group polarization refers to the tendency of a group to make decisions that are more extreme than the initial inclination of the members of the group. So, for example, if a person was individually only a little inclined towards risk-taking behavior, but they gathered into a group of other people who were all also individually only a little inclined towards risk-taking behavior, they'd all become more inclined and engage in riskier behavior than they would have on their own. This affects both attitudes and actions. Attitude polarization, also called belief polarization, specifically refers to group polarization where groups hold more extreme perspectives the longer that they share similar beliefs with others in a group. This is caused partially by confirmation bias, which we've already explored. In an echo chamber of like-minded people, a person has their beliefs confirmed, which can reinforce and thus strengthen them. The polarization is more easily observable with issues that are more emotional and contested, such as gender-based or LGBTQIA issues, capital punishment, etc. A change in action, also called a choice shift, is a possible consequence of group polarization. While group polarization refers to the attitude or belief change, the choice shift refers to a possible outcome of that change. Both the aforementioned risk-taking behavior and the opposite, a group becoming more cautious overall, are choice shifts caused by group-induced attitude polarization. Choice shifts are influenced by how strongly beliefs are held and how often a group interacts with each other. If an extreme perspective is introduced to a group by a single person and the group has not previously shared much of that extreme perspective, it isn't likely to result in a choice shift. However, the longer the extremist interacts with the group, the more likely it is that the group will have an attitude polarization and further a choice shift as a result from that interaction. A person might think, well, I don't have those extreme perspectives, so there is no way I'd be swayed by interacting with someone in a group who does have them. However, a study by Moscovici et al. Found that not only are the individual beliefs in a group irrelevant to whether this works, but differences in opinion can actually cause the shift to occur over time. People interacting, debating, and sharing their individual perspectives can combine to cause the group polarization. One study found that after deliberating together, mock jury members often decided differently than any individual juror was inclined to before deliberation. If the mock jurors mildly favored leniency, it would become more extreme leniency in deliberation, and the same for if they favored less leniency. Online, social media has enabled group polarization to occur even when people are not physically in the same location. So long as a group of people share enough of the same interests and beliefs to talk to each other, if a consistent dialogue is kept going, group polarization can occur. The more established a group is, the less likely it is to suffer from polarization, unless a new person is introduced who can shift the group. Additionally, if the group is well informed on a topic, group polarization is less likely to occur. Groups that are newly formed or that are facing tasks they aren't familiar with are far more likely to experience more extreme polarization. This, by the way, is why if you have a Nazi start hanging out, you are now a Nazi group. Because they can shift the group over time in the polarized direction of their beliefs. And even if you think, oh, but I could never, ever believe the same as a Nazi, that would never happen. If you repeatedly interact with a Nazi, it might. The Italian computational scientist Dr. Walter Quattrochiocci works with Dr. van der Linden to research how misinformation spreads on social media. Dr. Quattrochiocci and his research team conducted a very large cross-platform comparison of the echo chamber effect. They looked at more than 100 million stories on various social media platforms, including topics such as gun control, vaccination, and reproductive freedom and autonomy. Some of the social media networks were peer-to-peer platforms like Facebook, while others were group discussion forums like Reddit. The analysis allowed the researchers to look at how echo chambers functioned in different online environments. They found that echo chambers required homophily, the tendency of people with similar views to be more densely connected with each other than with the rest of the network of individuals. They also required bias in the diffusion of information, so that similar content was likely to reach like-minded people. The study found clear evidence that people became surrounded by peers who all shared similar perspectives, and then that group of peers is exposed to content that is already consistent with their views on an issue. They also found that this was more likely to occur on Facebook and then Twitter, now X, than on Reddit. The filter bubbles in place on social media platforms influenced whether or not people were funneled into echo chambers. Dr. Quattrochiocci and his team used the Susceptible Infection Recovered model, SIR model, from epidemiology to look at the misinformation being spread through the echo chambers. This model has 3 different states that a person can be in. They can be unaware they are spreading the virus, aware and actively spreading it anyway, or recovered and no longer spreading it. In this case, the virus is misinformation, and the unaware person can be in 3 states: susceptible to infection by misinformation, infectious and spreading misinformation, and recovering from spreading misinformation. People can recover from spreading misinformation, but it is difficult when they are surrounded by echo chambers that are reinforced by filter bubbles that fuel polarization on issues. Dr. Quattrochiocci studied how Facebook, in particular, allowed conspiracy theories and pseudoscience to spread in echo chambers. When Facebook still permitted people to retrieve data from its public application programming interface, he and his research team downloaded 5 years of data on public Facebook pages. They collected information on 54 million Facebook users from 330 popular conspiracy pages, 83 science-related pages, and 66 pages that explicitly debunked conspiracy theories. Of the 10 million users who mostly interacted with conspiracy theory content, only 1% of them engaged with a debunking post by even commenting on it at least once. Overall, only 6.5% of likes and 3.9% of comments on debunking posts came from people who regularly interacted on conspiracy theory pages or in conspiracy theory groups. Of that very small group who did interact with debunking pages or science pages with accurate content, the majority did so in a negative manner, and then followed up with increased activity in the conspiracy echo chamber compared to their norm. There is a hopeful theory that most people are unlikely to gravitate towards extreme polarized echo chambers, but one analysis of the anti-vaccination movement on Facebook found that that just wasn't the case. The researchers mapped out 100 million Facebook users, classifying them as either anti-vaccination, pro-vaccination, or undecided. The anti-vaccination group was smaller, but received much more interaction. The group that was growing the most rapidly was the undecided faction, and they would increasingly interact with the anti-vaccination group, with 50 million of them showing entanglement with the anti-vaccination group. Analyses of the content of the anti-vaccination pages found that they were able to use a wide range of potential narratives to interest people in their content. Everything from parental concern over child safety to alternative medicine to conspiracy theories about COVID-19. But the pro-vaccination pages were much more likely to be narrow in focus and reach far fewer people. Additionally, they were very scientific in their approach, whereas the anti-vaccination groups were less scientific and more emotional. A pro-vaccination group or page was not found to grow more than 100% during the course of the entire study, but the anti-vaccination groups grew by 300%. Disturbingly, not only do most people not expose themselves to perspectives outside their echo chamber, and filter bubbles prevent them from being exposed to information outside of their echo chamber, but even when they are taken out of their echo chamber and exposed to alternative beliefs, it may not help. Dr. Chris Bale, a professor at Duke University in North Carolina and author of the book Breaking the Social Media Prism, performed an experiment on about 1,600 active United States users of then Twitter, now X. They asked people if they would follow a Twitter bot for 1 month in return for $11. They weren't told what the bot would post about, only that it would post several times a day for 1 month. The participants took a survey to determine their political affiliation and attitudes towards various social policies, were sorted into Democrat or Republican groups, and then those groups were each randomly sorted into treatment and control groups. Democrats were shown retweets of Republican-leaning content, and Republicans were shown Democrat-leaning content. At the end of the experiment, it was found that Republicans had become more right-leaning and Democrats had become slightly more liberal, though to a lesser extent than the Republicans had moved right. Dr. van der Linden and his research team of Steve Rothje and Jay Van Wabel studied 2.7 million social media posts on Facebook and then Twitter, looking particularly at posts from major news media accounts and politicians, classifying them as either liberal or conservative. They found that derogatory language directed at the other side was shared or retweeted twice as often as posts about the side that the person was on. This could be called in-group versus out-group. People were more likely to share negative information about the out-group than they were positive information about the in-group. Across all platforms and datasets, each word referring to the out-group increased the odds of a post being shared by 67%, which was nearly 5 times the amount that tone being negative did, which was 14%. Filter bubbles then amplify the tendency of people within online echo chambers to be exposed to negative information about the outgroup because it drives engagement. The New York Times revealed that in 2020, internal research from Facebook found that posts which users rated as bad for the world generated more engagement. When Facebook tried to tweak their algorithm to downrank content that was rated as bad for the world, they found that engagement decreased. So they didn't use that algorithm, and instead used a different one that downranked such content a little less strongly so that people would keep engaging and keep making money for Facebook. Intriguingly, outside of the social media echo chambers with filter bubbles on them, multiple studies have found that people have pretty similar internet activity. Everyday news, shopping patterns, reading, etc., they were all quite similar. A study following the browsing activity of approximately 50,000 active readers of United States news, covering on the order of 2 billion page views, compared user polarization when accessing content directly versus accessing it via social media. It unequivocally determined that the news accessed via social media or via search engine is associated with greater polarization than news that is accessed directly by just reading a newspaper. This allows us to hypothesize about the incentives of users on social media and of social media platforms in general. However, it also requires that we consider the incentives of search engines, which prevents us from drawing categorical conclusions about social signaling, media consumption, and polarization on social media platforms, as these concerns do not apply in the search engine case. It may be theorized that this higher polarization is a contributing factor to the tendency of echo chambers to form on social media around divisive issues. However, additional research into online social signaling is required to make relevant comments regarding it as a possible contributing factor. It is, however, clear that incentives towards user engagement on the part of a content provider do tend towards division, polarization, and the sharing of mis- and disinformation that induces a strong emotional reaction. Basically, these companies make more money if they can drive us to engagement, and things that divide us and polarize us cause more engagement. Social media has been weaponized as a propaganda tool to target individual voters down to their geolocation and their digital footprints. Unfortunately, that's a topic for another class. The subject of how online social media-based propaganda manipulates elections and what to do about it is enormous, and I'm not entirely sure when or even how to approach teaching it. For now, I will note that filter bubbles alone can undermine democracy. So, can a filter on someone's search engine or social media have such an impact that it would undermine our democracy? 2 psychologists performed an experiment where they had US participants read biographies about 2 candidates who were running for the position of Prime Minister of Australia, and then indicate how likely it would be that they would vote for that candidate. The researchers created a fake search engine and asked participants to use it for about 15 minutes to learn about each candidate. The fake search engine was designed to display several pages with 6 clickable results about each candidate per page. The search engine results were slanted so that some participants would be shown neutral information and some would be shown information that was biased towards one of the candidates. Before being exposed to the slanted results, people did not demonstrate a marked bias in voting preference. But after viewing biased search results, the number of people who would vote for the politician favored by the search engine results increased between 37 and 63%. The researchers repeated the study in India during the real election in 2014 by exposing undecided voters to fake search engine results. The participants' favor towards the candidate supported by the search engine results increased between 8.3 and 10.7%. Disturbingly, 75 to 85% of people showed no awareness that they were being manipulated. The researchers referred to this as the search engine manipulation effect. Everything that we have covered in this course on combating misinformation and disinformation so far interacts. The fact that we are susceptible to propaganda, to misinformation and disinformation both, that it's structured in a way that it works on absolutely everyone, then the information that we want to read or that we want to view or that we want to interact with is being filtered by massive corporations who have financial incentive on what they show us and what they don't show us. The fact that those filters can then also be recommender systems that recommend extreme content and funnel people down into rabbit holes. The fact that after going down a rabbit hole, we can find ourselves in an echo chamber surrounded by people who are also polarized against the outgroup, and that polarization can get worse over time and change the very choices that we might make. All of that interacts and leads us to the problem that we all see right now looking at the world, where you can have a conversation with someone and they are in an entirely different world than you are. Because they are. They have been funneled and filtered and pushed into a different world than you are in. Okay. Next time we're going to get into actually combating the misinformation and disinformation. What techniques actually work to try and fight this problem on a societal level. But before I end for the day, is there a member of your friend group or family that you try to talk to and they're just in a completely different world than you are? They have different facts than you do. They believe very strongly in what you can see from outside of it is a world full of misinformation and disinformation. They're heavily propagandized, but when you try to puncture that world, all you encounter is resistance. Does that happen to you? Okay. Please remember to like and subscribe and share our content with people who you feel would benefit from it. And if you'd like access to the digital booklet of this information, it is also available for free to download on our Patreon at patreon.com/Sanctum of the Craft. Be safe out there, everyone.